Welcome to JGod Gaming. In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on how to play Team Deathmatch on Pointe du Hoc in Call of Duty World War II. This is a map that was in the beta and probably one of my least favorite maps in the actual game. In the beta, I loved it. I think just because the weapons that were involved, it was a little bit more fun to play and people didn't just run crazy. I think now in the full game, it just plays wild unless you're just in a team where people know exactly what they need to do. This is actually my fourth video in regards to map guides for Team Deathmatch, specifically in regards to how to play it. So what you're going to look at is a lot of times I'm going to go to overview and find out where they're spawning from. This map has a little bit more spread out spawns, so the spawns can flip and feel a little bit more random a majority of the time. So let's go ahead and take a look at those spawns. As you can see, there's spawns where the main spawns are, and then there's some just adjacent to it. There's one in the bottom house, one at the entry of the barn, and then also at the top by the pillboxes. So now let's get into a little bit of the gameplay. Just keep in mind I did this with bots because the point isn't to show how good someone is or bad or whatever. Just more to understand how the spawns work, because I know there's a lot of people that are newer to Call of Duty, just getting back into boots on the ground or whatever the case is. So this will just give you a better idea of how the spawns work. So ideally you want to hold one area of the map so that the spawns can be a little bit more predictable. But since the mini map is very small, it's hard to see the actual distance of your teammates. So a lot of times it's good to look at the overview of the map and get a good idea of where teammates and enemies are, because they'll be spawning in one particular area. So right here you'll go ahead and kind of look, I see where they're spawning from. They're all spawning on the right spawns. I just spawned on the left spawn. So usually the spawns are opposite of each other. So anytime you die, take a note of where you're spawning, because the teammates will be spawning right next to you and the enemy team will probably be spawning on the opposite side. With this one, the spawns feel a little bit more fluid just because they're so spread out. They can easily flip. Just by everyone moving to one side, it'll automatically flip to another open spot. So a lot of times it can get a little bit trickier to predict. Again, going back to the mini-map size, it's very small. So a lot of times when you can actually see where teammates are in your actual view, you're going to have a better idea of actually where the enemies are. So just a lot of times when you're looking through, I've already cleared out this left side. I know they could spawn behind me. And then they're probably going to be over here in this corner. So as soon as I kill this guy, it looks like the spawns are spawning on the opposite side based off where my recon plane is going. So I know they're either going to be up there by the pillboxes, over there by the turret, the main spawn, or by the house. So now they're all spawning in that little room in the corner, that two-story room. And they're pretty much all spawned there. You saw there was like 4 little red dots on the UAV or the mini-map. So a lot of times the spawns are super predictable in the sense that they're all going to spawn pretty much in these locations, but a lot of times how quickly that location moves is pretty random, especially because the way this layout is almost like a circle of a map versus more rectangular or square that usually get most maps. A lot of times the actual line that you need to cross to actually flip the spawns is a little bit harder to see. So I didn't even actually include that as part of this particular guide, which I did for the other ones, just because there's not really a clear distinct line, because since it's really a circle, a lot of times it's wherever the majority of your teammate is or are, is where all the enemy teams are not going to spawn. So a lot of times if you just kind of flank around the map in a kind of a circular motion, you knowing where your teammates are, you should be getting a reasonable amount of control on the map. It's different in objective game modes because those can be a little bit more rigid, which is nice. They're a little bit way more predictable, but in this particular case, you're kind of limited on where they're going to be. So it's just a matter of about kind of blocking people off. I usually prefer this house over here and the barn side, just because in general it's a little bit more controlled. The spawn's a lot farther, so if you're in that corner house, you know they can either spawn from the barn side or over here by the main spawn on the left. So they got to walk quite a distance, so a lot of times it's a little harder to get rushed. They could come through the middle, but it really just depends on what you're looking at. A lot of times with spawns too, there's no actual middle spawns. After breaking down the spawns on every map, I have never identified a spawn that will spawn you in the middle. And regardless of game mode or game type or any of that, it just doesn't happen in this game. So for whatever reason, the way that they've designed the game is to spawn people on the outskirts and let them spawn in. A lot of times there's this joke going around, the 3 in 1,000 bad spawns. a lot of times what people don't realize is your spawn location is dictated the second you die. Like, they figure it out the second you die, and it places you in one of these red areas. Well, what happens is if you actually look at the kill cam, and that's a 5-second kill cam or whatever, what happens is that by the time you actually spawn in, the data that actually occurred, or the changes of the map that occurred while you were looking at that kill cam, a lot happened. So a lot of times where it initially chose a good spawn for you, you delayed the spawn by looking at the kill cam. It'll actually make you feel like you got a worse spawn, because enemy team could actually be a lot closer and even in your spawn where you thought it would be. So a lot of times you're like, man, why was the enemy behind me? Well, in reality, they weren't behind you when you actually died. They were behind you by the time you actually looked at the kill cam. So it's always something to be aware of. A lot of times people don't realize that looking at your kill cam a lot of times can actually put you in a bad situation, just because it gives an enemy team an opportunity to move through your spawn and actually look as though they were coming up behind you in the kill cam when you die again a second time, or a third, or a fourth. So a lot of times I would avoid looking at kill cams if you feel like the enemy team's in the spawn, just because the game doesn't know better to flip the spawn before it actually spawns you in. If you look at the kill cam, it already designated that spawn location, so ideally what you want to do is spawn right in, and you should have worse spawns. That's why in hardcore, for the most part, the spawns aren't nearly as bad as they feel like in core game mode. So that's pretty much it. That's the video. If you did enjoy it in any way, go ahead and remember to click that like button. I'd like to know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you really help me out with the feedback on these types of videos, if you find them helpful at all, remember to leave a comment. If you are still watching and haven't yet subscribed, remember to click that subscribe button. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter if you'd like to stay up to date on my newest videos. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.